So Josh Sutterfield was just talking about efforts at the tribal level, in this case, a formal tribal office. Of course, I was talking about language camps, organized events, in this case, very explicitly designed for Myaami youth ages 10 through 16, although, of course, with involvement of people from infancy up to elderhood. But in some ways, one of the more important parts of Myaami education then is what happens in the home. Some people have grown up with that in the home. Other people have had to learn it later, but then can incorporate those ideas into the home in raising their own children or as interacting as family members. And so this afternoon we have three panelists who've been very active in these sorts of efforts and I think have a lot of wisdom. They're going to share some ideas with us. At the far end of the table we have Sherry Sutterfield. I'm going to let them all introduce themselves, or I'll just say their names. In the middle we have Dina Garza. And finally, closest to me, we have Danny Tipman. All three of these women are ones I greatly admire because of their dedication and because they've really brought the culture into their home. It's not something fake. It's something very, very real. So the three of you, this is really your time. And to an extent, I'd like to leave a little bit of time at the end for the audience to ask you questions. But I was hoping that we could start having you all introduce yourselves and just talk about your experiences with Myaamia in the home. And you can interpret that however you'd like, whether it be Myaamia culture, Myaamia language, or with this idea that those are one and the same thing. So.
I Sherry Sutterfield, Myaami. Pewe ne la kakuki. Kikwa situle, lunge, kakikwe. Misinewe. Hello, my name is Sherry Sutterfield. It's good to see all of you today. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you. In 2001, I was finally able to attend my first culture and language classes at the Longhouse. And when I'm there and look around and see so many Myaami faces, it does warm my heart. And how pleased our grandmothers and grandfathers must be to see us gathering together where they live. I attended my first year with my youngest son Joshua back there. And the next year my oldest granddaughter Kelsey was able to join us. We in turn go home and share with the rest of the family who are not able to attend. And over the years, we have used the many different learning teaching aids that the tribe and others have provided. And I am grateful for each one of them as we all learn in different ways. From the lesson plans, the charts, the dictionary, the computer games, just to name a few. We use word lists and labels, books and songs, and talking, always talking. Our youngest grandson, Tristan, was just 2 when I started learning our language. And for some reason, I would use phrases such as, do you want to know how to say that in Myaami? Or do you know how to say that in Myaami? Of course, being only 2, he would look at me with a quizzical look. Well, a few months later, while my son Philip, his dad, and I were sitting and visiting, Tristan was sitting on his dad's lap, and out of the blue, Tristan said, you know Myaami? And Philip and I looked at each other with eyes wide, and I nodded, and Tristan pointed and said, Uchia, Uchia in the house. That means fly, fly in the house. So he said his first Myaami word on his own. And when his baby sister, Channing, came along, we spoke Myaami with her from the time she was born. And the first word she said on her own was when she was leaving and said Tapalelani, which means I love you. And Kelsey, who a lot of you guys know, she was 9 and old enough to understand we were learning our language. So much so that one time I walked by while she was on the phone with one of her friends. And she was reading from a word list. And she said, my grandma is Myaami, and I am Myaami, and we are trying to revitalize our language. And we got 2 more grandchildren, Mary and Hayden, when they were 5 and 7, and our son Jacob married their mom. So they came into our family and heard Myaami from the time they joined us. So as you can see, in our own little family, our language was introduced differently to each child, depending on how long we had been studying it. All of the grandkids love the computer games, and especially the one where they match the picture with the spoken word. One time when Channing was 2, she was sitting at my desk playing it while Tristan, who was 4, was in the toy closet. And the word Chitta came up. And from the closet comes this little voice says, Chitta, 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 Redbird, Channing, Redbird. And now that Tristan's older, he likes to read from that little blue book that we got a long time ago. And not long ago, Channing and he and I were sitting in my office, and for like an hour, he read out loud to us from that book. And I told you about having word lists up, and I try to change them with words and phrases depending on what is happening in our lives. If it's fishing season, which Josh knows it's always fishing season at our house, well, we have fish terms and names. And Roger, my hubby, he came in one time telling me that his bass fishing partner had asked if they were going to catch big ossakani that day. So it extends to our friends as well. And if it's planting season, I have names of flowers and veggies and planting terms. And like if we're gathering together for a family meal, or we'll have family relationship names and playing and cooking terms and words. And we also learn through songs, such as singing the numbers song and the moon and the star song. And we also put words and phrases we are trying to learn to a tune. That's an easy way for us to learn a certain word. And I also like to take the lesson plans that we got from you a few years ago and study while waiting for appointments. And it was also something that was easy for me to copy and send to our oldest son, Stephen, who lives the furthest away. And we've just started using the Myaamia phrase book, and I know it will be a great help to all of us. And I think Daryl also wanted to know a few things that we might think might be a good idea as in learning aids, and maybe these are already in the process of being made or have been made, but I just think of like a baby's picture book would be good, so they could start learning their little words. And also like a computer game with phrases, maybe, and responses, just like the one that the kids have all played on, and we have too, learning words. And I know it'd be enjoyed by our family. Well, I guess I would like to close by telling you about something that just happened just a few days ago before I came up here, when a bunch of us gathered at our house, and Channing came out of my office and gave me a card she had just made, and I said, "Nayway." And she looked at me and she scrunched up her face and rolled her eyes and thought as hard as she could. And then she leaned forward and whispered, "How do you say you're welcome?" Yeah, it's your turn.
Hello. I'm Tina Garza. I'll tell you about how language learning developed in my home. I'm the mother of one 17-year-old son. 10 or so years ago, when the tribe first got the anagram for language reclamation, I saw an article in the tribal newspaper about a language camp that's going to be held, and I came out and attended that. It was an eye-opening experience for me. Being raised so far from the tribe, I knew I was Myaami. I knew that I was Indian, and I was proud of that, but I didn't know much more, and I always wanted to know more. But being able to learn the language and the culture that it started, it brings in culture as you learn the language. My son was 7 years old at that time, and I was able to go home and start teaching him. And at first we labeled things around the house. I had little labels on everything. On my plate cover it said Alakani, Atupudi on my table. I had little labels on everything around the house. And we started speaking those words, just replacing the English. As time went on, I started learning more about verbs and say like Pitulo Alakani, bring the plates. Pitulo Alakani Atu bring the plates to the table. And over the years we've built like that. For We use phrases for most of the things in the household, for a lot of our ordinary tasks in the household. Also, when we go to stores, I will point out items and I'll say, Kate, wait, you know, what? And he will tell me the names of things in Myaamia. And now he's 17-year-old junior in high school. And we have moved from Salt Lake City to Myaamia, Oklahoma. And I'm working for the Cultural Preservation Department. And I'm able to raise my son with the knowledge and the culture and the language that I had no opportunity at his age to learn. And when we travel in the cars, we made games. We traveled driving from Salt Lake City to Oklahoma, which is 2 full days in a car, of naming animals and naming hills and trees and just everything. We make up games about this. But it's been, the opportunity to learn the language and culture have been life-changing for me and my son, for our little family. And I would like to thank everybody who's been involved in it, because I would like to see more and more tribal members have the opportunity to make that journey. And as far as things I would like to see developed, I would really enjoy having more spoken materials, more CDs that had more phrases, because I think I need to hear the language more. I'll speak a lot to my son. He doesn't answer as much. It's just, but that would help me a lot to hear the language. And also songs, like Sherry said, it's a lot easier sometimes to learn something with the tune behind it, and I think that might be a great help to everybody. Thank you.
We'll share. Aya, Myaamia, Mila Myaamia, Windinchi Danny Tubman. I greeted you in Miami. I said hello, it's good to see you all. I am Miami, and they call me Danny Tubman. I have a little bit of a different story. First of all, I have 10 kids, and so that makes me a little different anyway. But I started down at Ashapeka Wawalechi at 7 Pillars, and with the language camps there, which is in Indiana. And it was this intense one week during the summer. And I would call up Karen and Daryl during the in-between time, and I'd say, when do you do this, when do you do this, you know. And they got to the point where they would say, oh, it's Danny again, you know, I'm sure. But I asked a lot of questions, and I think that's a really important way for us as adults to learn too, and to bring that into our families. You got to ask, and even if you're wrong, go ahead and say it and try, and worry about correcting yourself later to get that culture in now. I know there were times when I would say something and Daryl would say, actually, it's this way. I don't get so many of those actuallys anymore, and I'm proud to say that. But it's okay to be wrong, and have somebody else say, you know, this is what you really should be doing, or this is the way, a more Miami way to do it, and we can pass that on. We were always proud of who we were. I know my aunts and my uncles were here today, and we were always proud of who we were, at least within our family. Sometimes we went out into the greater society, and you couldn't talk about who you were, because, you know, here I am, blue eyes and freckles, you know, and you're a Miami Indian. People didn't see that and didn't understand. And so when the opportunity to learn our language and to incorporate that much more culture into our families came along, I jumped on it. I wanted to do that. So we made the effort. I took my kids down to to 7 Pillars, and we went through those times down there. And we also, as an adult, I have been able to participate in the A1 Zapata camps or A1 Zapata program in Oklahoma as how did you say it today? I'm a cook. How did you said it so
Culinary
nicely?
/ dietary
Yes.
/ food consultant.
Doesn't that sound nice?
It's also far more reflective. She and Karen Baldwin, both of the cooking and also menu planning, but designing that as part of the curriculum, the necessary research.
It is.
And,
It is, it's things that I've talked to elders and people within our family who have kept those traditions on plants and on cooking, and we incorporate all of that into how the kids get to eat throughout the week. We have one traditional meal in the evening, and that for me is a wonderful part of the camp, because the kids get to come and we get to learn about the plants, and they get to see the proper way to harvest it and how it's used. And we look at maybe something that's growing next to it that it is a poisonous lookalike. We say don't use that, but it is used for medicines or for portage or whatever. And then there's other plants that are used for food. And they get to learn that from other Miami people. And that's an important part of passing that on, that intergenerational knowledge. It came from my aunts and uncles, from my grandfather, from my people. It came from other Miamis that I've talked to. We've really put an effort into doing that. There's been so many people who've helped in that, especially Mike Canella has really researched and helped us to understand what plants were used and for what. I also homeschooled my kids, and so we would incorporate the classes in the curriculum that Daryl and Karen had developed. We would use it in our home as a part of what we were studying, which I know a lot of people who use public schools and parochial schools can't do that, but we had that opportunity available to us, and it really helped us in the language usage. When my kids got to high school, I sent them off to high school. I didn't get to homeschool them then, and I know my daughter, as she would kind of go into combat with some of these teachers who would say, oh, we have, the savages who lived in Indiana before so-and-so came in here and made culture and civilization here. And oh, what a heartbreaking thing for her. And she would stand up, and I was so proud of her and how she would do battle. But we're not savages. And but it brings a pride to them, and that's something that they can pass on to.
While you think about that, I'll just point out in my presentation, we had the pre-camp, which is being Miami Indian, the common response to people, so I don't know, I'm not sure. Or some people had mentioned something specific, some specific historical fact, but of course it was Danny's daughter, who talked about the misrepresentation in the general public. And you could see that education had been happening in the home. And she was one of the youngest there as well.
Boy.
Good.
And I didn't help her with those, I promise. She did her own.
I saw.
Well, the things that what I would see is if we can have more and more programs brought into the home and more kids brought out to it. We gotta have 2 or 3 more camps, I think, a year. I don't know.
2 or 3 more camps.
Yeah.
Let's have one here.
You have one here, okay. That sounds good. I think songs, bedtime songs and stories and anything that we can incorporate into their daily lives would help us. If things are put on iPods, my kids are crazy about sticking those things in their ears and listening. If we can download it from the website, maybe, somebody reading a book or singing a song or doing poetry or whatever in the language, I think that would help us too. But I really believe in the camps. I think it sets the kids on fire for who they are and what they should be, what being a Myaami is. So, anyway.
Well, I have all sorts of questions, but rather than my taking up the time, let's ask for questions or comments from people here in the audience. And I can talk to you later. And I'll let you. Actually, no. Yeah.
I have a question for those of you whose children have gone out to Miami University. Sherry, and you also. What were your hopes and fears about your children leaving home and going to another university that is called Miami?
I have a daughter going here, and it was like, I'm so glad that there's this community where she could come in, and she had big brothers here, basically, you know? They were gonna look out for her, or else I was gonna kick her butts. So, now, when they have that organization there already, I had children who went to other universities, and I had a son who went to Notre Dame, and within 3 months, he called home and said, Mom, I can't take this is not for me, I'm coming home. And he did. And this is Mary's second year here because she already has a family set up, somebody who's a support system. You are different than the other students here, but you got a family of Miamis who understand that culture that you were brought up in. So I think that was the most, how could you ask for better than that, you know?
And with Joshua, of course, he was pretty old when he came up here, so so I didn't have to worry about him going across the nation. But I actually think I learned a lot from him being out here for 6 years. I sometimes think I graduated from this. But I am really thrilled with them having the classes and just the friends and family that are their cousins, basically, and being all together. And they're learning so much, and they're getting to learn everything from the language to the culture to the economics, isn't it? And something else. History. Oh, man.
The whole thing.
The whole thing.
Independent studies.
I guess my question is for kind of going back about what George said about having to learn it yourself and then turning around right away and teaching it to somebody else. Maybe to comment. I remember you two mentioned something about learning as you're going as a bit. Maybe comment on struggles or how you feel about being a second learner and teaching it to people.
Well, like I said, when I first started learning it, I thought I needed to describe to them that this was Myaami, this was English. And so I learned as we got more grandkids, and I had got more into being Myaamia, that you just immerse them. That's who you are, and that's who they are, then they feel it.
I found close to the same thing, that if I just started using the language, that was the best way to teach him. If he didn't understand, if I was using something new and he didn't understand it, I would explain to him what I meant in English. After that, I would just keep using it through repetition when it's used in the context of what you're trying to say. I think a lot of times you don't even need to give an English meaning, that with usage that they'll just begin to understand.
With using the language instead, I know when I had Gloria, I was nursing her, I was breastfeeding her, and I didn't want that to be a public thing, and I would say, go? Are you hungry? And she'd say, yeah. We'd go and I'll go nurse. And nobody else around us knew what was going on, just that we had left the room, but we knew what was going to happen. So, yeah, I think that you got to use it and use it and use it, and from the time they're small, start out.
I'm just curious, does any one of you have spouses that are not from the Myaamia tribe? And if so, how are you to bring them into the process of learning the language of
We speak the Miami language at home as much as we can, and my husband, he, understands it, and he speaks a little here and there. I don't know. My kids are more advanced than we are in the language, and they'll sit at the kitchen table and say, "Nah, nah, 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 nah," and they're calling each other names, in language, and they don't know whether to stop that or not. But he will, talk to him in Miami once in a while, not very often. It's not his thing. That's okay. He doesn't not support us. I'm here, and he's at home doing things that I should be doing. So, he does help that way for me.
And my husband, Roger, he supports us fully, and he just tries to learn right along with the rest of us, from the language to the culture to the history, and of course we learn most of it through Josh. Joshua.
And it's just me and my son in my household, so we don't have.
Karen Baldwin is an example of how a person came in and really helped support. I don't know. Do you have any comments, Karen?
You're doing great.
I think there are a lot of the spouses who really participate, and help out.
I was going to point out, in line with that same question, that the norm, at least the vast majority of the time, tribal members will marry non-tribal members, and sometimes those tribal spouses then will become tribal members in the cultural sense, but they're not people who normally would have been raised as a tribal member. And certainly around here, there aren't very many Miami people around, just in general. Around northeastern Oklahoma, other places where there are concentrations of Miami people, there are also concentrations of people who are Indians of other nations as well. So you have a lot of people with mixed heritage. And I think sometimes people do struggle. Or sometimes it does become more of a one parent, one language, one parent, one culture, but we also see a tremendous amount of support from spouses of tribal members who are not themselves or who were not raised as tribal members, but who nonetheless in many cases want their children to know their culture and are motivated by that. It's a tremendous amount of support.
I'm a student here just at Myaamia University. I think this is great that you guys are doing there. As a student, though, Myaamia University obviously has its culture, just like the school and the buildings and their traditions. But what is something at the school being called Myaamia University that you want the students who come here and make such a pride of the name of Myaamia University and be proud to come here from your culture? Then what would you want the students to know? Students that aren't part of the Myaamia tribe but carry that family with them. What's something you would want them to know or to cherish about that?
That we're still here.
And growing.
Yeah,
And learning.
we shall remain.
I think just acknowledgement of our past, our present, our future, and respect.
I'd just like to make a comment on when I was young, it wasn't very cool for my dad to be Indian. It wasn't a thing to say. But in retrospect to my mother, who was a non-native, she supported him. We was all taught to be very proud of who we were and never ashamed. And so sometimes the non-Indian supported more than my dad did, because he was taught, oh, don't say nothing or you lose your job, or, so on and so forth. So, in support of the non-native person. But she was wonderful.
I have a question. How about the issue of grandparents? I know that sometimes a situation arises where grandparents are very important for short-term life. How do you deal with
Well, I am the grandmother, so. But I guess I didn't understand.
Yeah, maybe I could rephrase this. George is bringing up the issue of is it,
Maybe not Miami grandparents, or even Miami grandparents.
right, of multiple the fact that, you know, a child is not raised by his or her parents, but rather is raised by everybody in the family, living their extended society at large. Maybe one way to rephrase that question then is to think about, you know, or people other than you in the family.
Like are they being supportive of Kelsey and the other grandkids being so involved, especially Kelsey being older and being so involved in everything she does, which they are?
If they're not,
Oh, I don't know. I haven't had to deal with it because everybody is very supportive in all the different circles of our life.
Well, it's unanimous. One thing I've observed there sometimes is it's not so much a lack of support, but also just not quite understanding what's going on and why. I want to relate to all of you as a way of trying to close up this presentation. I get a strange question. I teach various classes in linguistics and related fields at the University of California, Berkeley. Of course, I had a lot of discussions when I was here as an undergraduate many years ago. And people, I think, very genuinely would have this question and would come up to panelists such as these and ask this question, why are you doing this? And through my own experience, I've realized that maybe the better question is, why wouldn't you do this? But from a certain point of view, or a certain ideological standpoint, a certain worldview, a certain type of training, a certain type of education, everybody understands, say, learning some language that's widely used in the world, and it'd be have a communication benefit by knowing that you could go to the said country and perhaps speak that there. But sometimes I get this very strange question of why. And I don't think it's motivated by something evil or something wrong, but just a lack of understanding. I'm very pleased this afternoon that I think that question of why, or why is this important, has sort of been interwoven throughout everything. But I wondered if the three of you had any comments for that, the question of why.
I have one comment. The Osal was in there doing the film. They were interviewing my son, and they asked him, why do you want to learn the Miami language? And he thought for a minute, had kind of a puzzled look on his face. He said, I don't know how to tell you. He says, it's just who I am. It's just what I am. And I'll tell you, at his age, I don't think that my identity would have been where his is. So,
On that note, I think that was just a wonderful way to wrap up this formal part of the presentation. But again, these discussions can continue afterward. The Mishinewe.
Oh, Mishinewe. I want to thank everyone, and I wish I saw some more red shirts, because the tribal students are actually required to help put this on. So for a week in advance, they were stuffing packets, they were getting posters ready, some of them were involved in research, and so there was just a tremendous amount of work that every tribal student participated in. Everything from the little daycare that we have down the hallway to name tags and you name it. And so for those that are here, I'd like to give them all a very big hand for that. And our staff, Bobby Burke, Amy Numrich, and Andrew Strack, and Mary Tittman. Where's Mary at? Hiya, Mary. Mary's one of our tribal students that works also as the administrative assistant for the project. We have 3 of our tribal students that are employed through the Myaamia project. We're very fortunate to be able to do that kind of work. This has been incredibly engaging for me. I actually played a little bit less of a role this time than I did in future programs, and I'm really, really pleased with the depth of conversation. We finally reached that point where we're really having to ask some pretty hard questions, and And more people are entering that circle and beginning that discussion. And that's really the other side of language revitalization that is beyond the techniques and the tools and the dictionaries, is the how and the why and some of the other ideological things that Wes and others talked about. We're not planning to go anywhere. We're going to stick around. I encourage you to visit with some of the presenters, check out the posters, and I hope to get a chance to visit with some of you. I want to thank our business committee members that are here. This is their one shot in 2 years to get some behind-the-scenes stuff. Other representatives from the tribe, the Cultural Resources Office, our archivist, librarian, a number of people from Oklahoma have come up here to kind of see what's really going on here. Our guests from the Potawatomi Nation, all of you, Mishinewe.